Over 175 years ago, the Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard wrote, "Attempts are made nowadays in so many ways to free men from all bonds, beneficial ones as well." Kierkegaard's prophetic pronouncement highlights a fundamental contradiction between the Christian view of a happy or blessed life and modernity's. Hello, I'm William Isley, and welcome to Thinking Wisely with Dr. Isley, where we learn to live wisely by thinking wisely. Today's video is the second in a series of brief reflections on the biblical book called the Psalms. In this series, we consider how the biblical text and its underlying worldview interact with universal philosophical questions and touches our individual contemporary lives at their very heart. So here's the question that Kierkegaard's pronouncement raises for us. Can limits be essential to happiness? The scriptures agree with Kierkegaard that there are beneficial bonds or limits. However, the idea that limits contribute, let alone are essential to happiness or living well, is inimical to most modern views. Modernity's rejection of beneficial bonds is radical and permeates many of our current attitudes, even on a subconscious level. Therefore, in this video, I outline the general modern perspective. In the next video, I will explain the biblical outlook. Beginning with modernity will help us to appreciate better the biblical view of living well and enable us to examine whether or to what extent we have been influenced by modernity. Let's look at modernity's answers to four crucial questions. We have already answered number one, but we'll see the reasons for that better now. One, are limits beneficial? Two, what is the consequence of belief in or the existence of God? Three, who defines man? And four, what is human freedom? As we shall see, modernity's answers to these questions clash at every point with the biblical view of how to live well. Before we start, let me explain that I'm using modern and modernity in a general sense to refer to the trend of philosophical thought beginning in the 18th century Enlightenment, which argues that we can live well without reference to God. In order to understand this modern trend, we need philosophers who face head on the consequences of rejecting belief in God for the meaning of life. Therefore, we will focus on Friedrich Nietzsche and Jean Paul Sartre. They are not only two of the most important atheistic philosophers of the modern era, but they also grapple most passionately and effectively with the idea of living without God. Significantly, both also criticize those who think that we can continue adhering to a Christian ethic without belief in God. First, Friedrich Nietzsche. In The Happy Science, Nietzsche proclaims that God is dead, which he explains as the belief in the Christian God has ceased to be believable. The death of God is the background of our cheerfulness, he claims. Nietzsche expresses his joy at the death of God in the following dramatic way. How were we able to drink up the sea? Who gave us the sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? What did we do when we unchained this earth from its sun? Whither is it moving now? Whither are we moving now? Away from all suns? Notice in this justly famous passage the elimination of boundaries and limits, wiping away horizons, unchaining the earth from the sun. In this higher history than all history hitherto, there will be no suns, nothing limiting human beings. Significantly, Nietzsche asks, must not we ourselves become gods simply to seem worthy of causing the death of God? The idea of God is the ultimate limit. Without it, Nietzsche claims we can be truly happy and free with no limits imposed upon us. Now let's hear what Jean-Paul Sartre says. While Nietzsche is ecstatic over the death of God, Sartre, to say the least, is a bit more sober minded. He is also more consistent and insightful. In his book, Existentialism and Human Emotions, Sartre employs the helpful analogy of the paper cutter to explain the basic existential tenet: existence precedes essence. The craftsman has a concept of a paper cutter to carry out the function of cutting paper. He then makes the paper cutter. Therefore, the concept of a paper cutter, its essence, precedes its existence. Analogously, God the Creator has the concept of man and then creates man. Therefore, like the paper cutter, man's essence precedes his existence and crucially is born with a nature given to him by God. Atheistic existentialism, the philosophy Sartre adheres to, denies that there is a God, and so there is no pre existing essence. Man turns up, appears on the scene, and only afterwards defines himself. His existence precedes his essence, and therefore there is no human nature, since there is no God to conceive it. According to Sartre, man is nothing else but what he makes himself. Of all the living things in the universe, only human beings define who they are, thus creating their own nature. For Sartre, the fact that there is no God that limits humans by defining them means that we are free, indeed radically free. Freedom is not just the capacity to make choices, it is also the making of our own nature without a God who predefines us. However, Sartre famously states, man is condemned to be free. In every action, and we must act, we are defining ourselves, condemned every moment to invent man. In choosing man also invents values. There is no externally imposed law. Without God, life has no meaning a priori. We give meaning and value to our lives. In contrast to Nietzsche's joy at the death of God, Sartre states that the emotions of an authentic life are anxiety, despair, and forlornness. That is, we are all alone. The responsibility of being an authentic human being falls completely on us. Since we human beings create our own nature, invent ourselves, and give life meaning and value, Sartre concludes in a manner similar to Nietzsche: man is the being whose project is to be God. Let's wrap up our discussion by summing up modernity's answer to our four questions: what it means to live well. One, limits are not beneficial to living well. Two, belief in the existence of God is the great limit that keeps us from living well. Three, because there is no God to limit us, we define ourselves, we create our own nature. Four, therefore, human freedom is choosing to be what we want to be. In different ways, both Nietzsche and Sartre agree on these basic points of what it means to live well. They see the existence of God, or the belief in the existence of God, as the fundamental limit on human beings. Once God is cast aside, we are not limited but free. We are free to be what we want to be. As can be well imagined, the contrast with the biblical view in Psalm 1 could not be starker. In our next video, we shall look at Psalm 1 to see how greatly it differs from modernity's view on how to live well. In the meantime, I suggest you examine to what extent you believe you are affected by modernity's idea that limits are not beneficial to living well. I encourage you to leave comments and questions in the section below. Also, if you're interested, please click the like button and subscribe to get notices of the publication of these videos. Thank you.